China's responded to this shooting down of this spy balloon in the United States, expressing, not surprisingly, I guess, its strong dissatisfaction and maintaining that the balloon was, quote, an unmanned civilian airship. Now, a statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry says the US is, quote, obviously overreacting and seriously violating international practice. I'm puzzled by this whole thing. Why would China float a balloon across the United States like that? Malcolm Davis is the senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, joins us online from our Canberra studio. Malcolm, do you have some doubts about what's going on here, or is it relatively straightforward?
It's relatively straightforward. This is a Chinese spy balloon gathering intelligence on highly classified and highly sensitive US military installations, including large numbers of nuclear missile silos. The Chinese suggestion that this is somehow a weather balloon gone off course is farcical. So this is an intelligence gathering system that the US was correct to shoot down.
Well, I was listening to someone today suggesting that once this is shot down, then the equipment that's attached to the bottom of the balloon obviously will probably be able to be recovered by the Americans. It crashed into fairly shallow water. That sort of would be an advantage, would it not, to the Americans, because they can now work out exactly what this thing had seen.
To a degree. I think the general assumption is that this was undertaking what's known as signals intelligence and electronic intelligence. So it wasn't about taking photos. It was about gathering information in terms of radio transmissions, microwave emissions, radar transmissions, and analysing those and sending those back to Beijing. Now, when the shoot-down happened, the payload and the solar panels that were next to that payload separated from the balloon at 60,000 feet and dropped down into the ocean. It would have hit at fairly high speed. So it really depends on just how much is left of that payload at the bottom of the sea as to whether the Americans can gather any useful intelligence from it.
These things drift, obviously. Would we have had them across mainland Australia at any time, do you know?
Look, it's possible. If you look at the size of the Australian mainland in comparison to the continental US, they're about the same size, but the US is much more heavily populated than Australia. So it's possible that one of these things could have been sent across Australia to gather intelligence and not many people would have seen it. And there are targets, that the Chinese would be interested in, such as Pine Gap near Alice Springs, and of course Northwest Cape near Exmouth, as well as other critical military sites. So it's possible that the Chinese could have done this, and I'm sure the Department of Defence would know about it. But if it has happened, they have chosen not to talk about it.
Malcolm, what does it do to what appears to be, still pretty rocky relationships between the United States and China? Obviously, it's not going to help, is it?
It's not going to help. We're at a nadir at the moment in terms of the US-China relationship. And I think that the Chinese probably sent this spy balloon in part for political purposes to undermine the US position in the talks between Secretary of State Blinken and the Chinese government by essentially undertaking an act of provocation. In effect, it's come back to bite them on the toe. The Chinese have now got egg on their face and they look the aggressor. But certainly it doesn't help in terms of trying to mend fences between Beijing and Washington DC. Not that any real significant advance in that aspect would have been made at these talks.
Malcolm, I know the Australian Strategic Policy Institute has an international forum on cyber and critical technologies tonight. How important is that and what will be discussed?
Look, I think that cyber technology and its ability to shape international policy is really critical. It's one of the new operational domains alongside space. And I think that Australia is very much involved in cyber security and cyber policy. So it's that discussion happening up at ASPI tonight that is really important.